If no one tells you when to work, no one tells you what to sell, no one tells you how to price it or which direction to pursue, you have decision authority. The question isn't whether you have it, the question is whether you have structured it. And over the past few weeks, we've talked about leadership, not as position, but as responsibility. And so Dave and David are here with me today, and we're going to talk about how these ideas flow into decision making when you're a solo operator. We've talked in the last few months about friction, not just the internal resistance of projects not working out correctly, but structural pressure imposed on your business as from the system. Pressure from suppliers who shape the tools that we use. Pressure from competitors above us and below us in the market space who compress values. Pressure from substitutes, the internal teams of our clients, DIY systems, AI, and how AI impacts all of the things that we do. And we've talked about friction that emerges when we operate between the business models in my framework without declaring which one is the governing framework. The point is, friction is always going to show up. Friction is not failure. It is the economic system that we are operating within, exerting force on what we are trying to do. We talked about agency. We talked about how the word agency has multiple layers and how authority has to align with the access and the responsibility we have in order for our levels of agency to be just or right. And we talked about the reality that before looking at business models and the offers and the funnels that we're making, each of us has agency as a thinking person with authority to choose the life that we want. We talked about authority being context specific. And then last week, we talked about structure. We talked about having the business structure before trying to scale that business. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. We talked about how the 9-point marketing plan as a framework isn't about tactics. It's about governing the structure of our business. But structure is only as strong as the decision cycles that are operating inside that structure. We can artificially create a business plan that says this is what our business is, but if we aren't making decisions that are aligned with that, then the structure doesn't exist in the reality of our business. So today is a hinge. The structure only works if someone is making decisions inside that structure. And if you're a solo operator, that someone is you. Many solo business operators will say that they have a time problem. They say things like, I don't have enough hours in the day. I'm juggling too many balls. I'm overwhelmed. Very often, though, what they actually have is a decision matrix structure problem. They're making too many ungoverned decisions. They have too many open loops. They're carrying too many responsibilities without a hierarchical decision-making process. From my background, where I come from in a military setting, staff organization and processes structure the decision cycle. The commander sets the intent and the priorities. The staff brings alternate perspectives that the commander cannot hold alone in his own mind. The same thing is true in the corporate setting. Hierarchy distributes the decision load. The board defines direction. The C-suite brings specialized lenses, the executive officer, operations, finance, marketing, legal, technology. And then the managers and supervisors carry responsibility in the organizational layers. All of those layers shape each decision before it's executed. And in a solo business, none of those alternate perspectives exist. So in a solo business, you are the commander, but you don't have a staff. You are the CEO, but you don't have department heads between you and the employee. Oh, by the way, that's also you. Which means if you don't deliberately search for the blind spots, the blind spots will compound. Therefore, structure must be chosen, or it will choose itself for you. If your decision authority should be exercised deliberately. If you don't, it will feel destabilized. And that destabilization is freedom without insulation. So today is about asking, how do you lead your own business without getting stuck in analysis paralysis? How do you keep moving without constantly reorganizing your own business identity? How do you use decision tools without outsourcing your judgment? We're talking about decision authority in the constraint of the realities of your business. And I've invited Dave and David because they've operated in these environments where this business structure isn't just theoretical, it's the reality of what they do. They've built, rebuilt, consulted, and navigated multiple businesses. So here's the introduction. David Robbs is an operations consultant and founder of Precision Consultants. He works with side hustlers and small business owners who are stuck juggling every decision by themselves. He helps them build practical systems and structures so their business doesn't depend on them for every single decision in every single moment. That's the structural pressure that we're unpacking today. Dave Robbs brings a broader and complementary perspective. He's led manufacturing management in excess of 30 years in that career, business consulting through Waymaker Northwest, and he has served as the founder and executive director of the Poyeho Project. He's operated in both for-profit and nonprofit environments where leadership structure and decision-making have real consequences. What you're going to hear from the two of them is the lived experience from environments where governance isn't optional, it's the structure. They're going to bring operational texture to the conversations that I've been leading through the last few weeks. And so today I get to only participate, only facilitate. But here's what I want you as the audience to listen for. Where are you carrying the weight of decisions that could be offloaded to a structure system instead? Thank you, gentlemen, for listening to that intro. Before we go into the specifics of how these things apply to people's business decisions, could you tell us each about your management experience, where you've carried responsibility for the decisions that impact other people's outcomes? And I'll let the two of you just decide who jumps on the bandwagon first.
Go ahead, David.
Sure. Well, Keith, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today and to get to share with all your fine folks that you're guiding through this business process and processes. So thank you for the opportunity. I think a little bit about me. I have worked in warehousing management. That was probably one of my earlier jobs, able to actually help run the warehouse. I worked we had a company the company that I worked for managed a large pool of equipment for Hewlett Packard. Formerly it was Compaq, but Hewlett Packard bought them, so I'll kind of age that. So those of you that have been around the industry for a while. And those devices were used at Microsoft events and traded for sponsorships there. And so our team managed anywhere from 3 to 5,000 assets across desktops, monitors, printers, you name it, we pretty much had it. If HP made it and it was going to be used at a show, it was something that we managed. Um, and so in the process of starting that job in 2003, it only took a few months of being there as just an employee that the owner decided right away that he wanted me to be in charge. So I got handed the reins to, it was just a handful of employees, 3 or 4 people from, give or take, but across pretty much all the operations of managing availability of hardware to, hardware coming back from events and being reconciled, put back into inventory in a working, um, you know, so it's ready to go for the next show. Managing our delivery schedule. We had deliveries at Microsoft campus, as well as HP Northwest. So it was just managing all those things. And I did that for 3 or 4 years full time. And then I had an opportunity to do something else. So I started my small business Precision Consultants in 2007. And I still continued to work as a 1099 for that company, doing a lot of the hardware availability, scheduling, and still handling some of the communication flow between the customer and the company that I worked with. Um, that led to an opportunity in 2013 to go to work for Microsoft as a contractor. And so I started with a demo team. We were the Windows Phone demo team. So for those of you who've, again, been in the industry for a while, you know how old the Windows Phone is and that it is no more. But when I started with them, I started in inventory. It was pretty much an entry level, but once again, it only took 6 months to a year before I was put in charge. And we grew our team from just supporting Windows Phone devices across the organization to PCs, Xboxes. We were kind of doing all the demos at the large trade shows, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. We were responsible for the devices that were going to be out on the show floor. We did keynotes, supporting our executives when they would do demonstrations from a keynote floor. And again, it was just, I think a part of it was just the understanding of how we can best operate as a team, oftentimes pushed me into a leadership role, whether I wanted it or not. Um, and so, yes, and so through that time from 2013 to the present, I still contract at Microsoft, but just in the last 6 months to a year, I've become very intentional about growing Precision Consultants to actually begin to help other small and medium-sized businesses, as opposed to just working at a large corporation and helping them. But I guess, Keith, I hope I'm answering the question there, but just giving just kind of a scope on the different responsibilities, management of people, very probably not as much as you'll hear from Dave, my dad. But I've managed a lot of things and a lot of processes, a lot of logistics, making sure um, making sure everything happens as it should, as smoothly as possible, with knowing anyone who's worked at a large corporation and in things that are in industries that are high tech and or move very quickly. There's so many things that change. You start off with a plan and this is your target, but as you're moving, it begins to change and shift, and you have to be able to adapt and move with it. So that's been a lot of the last 13 years for me at Microsoft, has been a lot of um, those you have to be agile. You have to be able to adapt to the changes. And I guess for me, I was pretty proficient at it, as well as making sure the team, we all found success, because I wasn't the only one doing the lifting. There was a whole
Hmm.
team of people. And so how do I put us all in a good place to find success? And I think, even though I haven't always been given the title of manager or leader, a lot of my teammates look to me as that. They look to me for, hey, what do you think we should do? How should we handle this? And yeah, so I'll stop there. But let me know, Keith, if I didn't cover anything as well.
No, that's good.
So my background is a little bit different. I started out in manufacturing coming out of college as a programmer, and I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and then I shifted to another company. And what I've discovered is that most of my employers, who are typically the owners of the business, they started out as solopreneurs. They were very good at machining, whatever type of machinery they knew how to run, and they decided to put one of those machines in their garage so they would work for an 8-hour shift and then come home and run some more on making machine parts. And then they would grow that, and did very well. However, they reached a point where they realized that they were good at machining but not at managing, and so that provided an opportunity for me to have a job. And because my giftings are more administrative, and being able to take the big picture and cut it down into small pieces and make it all happen. So I understand the world of solopreneurs, and I was a solopreneur several times in my career. One of the things that you discover is that just because you're good at what the company doesn't mean you're necessarily good at running a company that does that, because the skill set for those two things are entirely different. You can be the best plumber in the world, but you may not have the skills it takes to run a plumbing company. Now, you may have great ideas and great um, innovation and that type of thing, but being able to communicate that and manage that is an entirely different skill set. So many times people jump into business because they're good at, like I said, at what the business does. Um, However, when you start your own business, you're playing with much worse odds than any casino in Vegas, because only 10% of companies tend to last beyond their infancy stages. And it can come from a variety of things. Some is maybe lack of knowledge. It can be from just reaching a point of frustration and all that type of thing, because you're growing outside of your ability and capability. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless you don't identify that I don't have the skill set to make this happen. And so I must, at that point, begin to include others. Now, one of the things I learned early on is never work alone. And that doesn't mean go find a partner. What it means is find somebody, maybe not even in your marketplace, that is successful, so that you have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. I had a person like that. His name was Jerry Corum. He didn't know anything about manufacturing, but he was successful at owning car dealerships and setting goals and achieving those goals and those kind of things. So I didn't go to him because he was a yes man. I went to him because he would always ask me the hard questions. He would say, "Well, why would somebody want to do that?" And basically, it was the questions I didn't want somebody to ask, because I didn't really have the answers. But I would encourage you, as a solopreneur, it's vitally important that you find people that you can bounce ideas off of, that you trust, that have proven their success in whatever they're into, The other thing that I recommend for solopreneurs is to find a what I called a brainstorming group or a mastermind group that were in other industries. Because when we're in a particular industry, we get very myopic, and we can only see down this road that we've been traveling on, and we don't see things from the outside. So it's important to have those kind of people that will interact with you, to ask you the hard questions. And it's okay, sometimes you can come up with the right answer, but if you're not listening to those hard questions, then you're not really looking at your marketplace objectively. Um, so my background was that my Poyeho Project, my nonprofit that Keith mentioned, was business training and development in Southern Africa. I just felt a call there, and I did that for 17 years. Um, and what it was to, because they have the same issues as we have here, that we have all over the world, with small business. They're the same problems. They may look a little different, but in essence, they're the same. The other thing as a solopreneur is, don't see yourself as, I'm the only one having this problem. Because I can tell you that looking at businesses, small businesses and medium sized businesses, every business reaches a point where you have to make the tough question or the tough choice or answer. One of those key points is your very first employee. Hiring that first employee, that's a huge juncture for any business. But I will tell you this, that IBM at one point was a solopreneur enterprise. Okay. And we look at, I mean, IBM doesn't have the ring that it used to have, um, but I would say like Microsoft, like where David works, at one time it was a solopreneur operation. So it was somebody's idea, they stuck with it, they did all these things in order to grow it and make it what it is today. And the thing about it is that, as a solopreneur, a lot of times, you get the feeling like I'm the Lone Ranger. I'm out here I'm saving the whole West all by myself. When the reality is that you're one of many solopreneurs. So one of the questions that you should ask early on is, where do I want this to go? Do I want this business to actually grow beyond just me doing what I do, or not? And those kinds of questions are important to answer, because then you know where you're headed and you know what has to get done. And so those are just a couple of little areas that, as a solopreneur, you can get trapped pretty easy, and then everything kind of caves in on you. So um, you're not the Lone Ranger. You're not the only person that's floundering out there, perhaps. And if you just happen to step into a successful enterprise because nobody's made your product before, don't get a big head. But the little short snap phrase that I had when I had my consulting firm, Waymaker, was helping people be successful on purpose. Okay. Because there's two ways to get into it. Some businesses are successful by accident. They just happen to fall into the right situation. But most businesses have to be successful on purpose, by plan, by working out details and those kinds of things. So, yeah, I'm all for you.
What I'm hearing you said on purpose, make decisions on purpose is the way I phrased it in my own head. That's not what you just said, Dave. But it's the weight of how responsibility forces you to prioritize your own behaviors. Dave, you said something about you have to be agile enough to move with the situation as it changes and understand the implications of where you're going. Dave, you said having someone to have someone to bounce ideas off of. When someone doesn't have that person or group of people that they can bounce those ideas off of, what are the operational challenges that solopreneur is going to face when everything runs through them? Every decision, every action, all the tasks, all the responsibility.
Well, I'd say you put a big weight on yourself, thinking that somehow you have the whole perspective.
Mm.
You have the whole perspective. This is it, you know. And reality may be something entirely different. Let's say you make widgets
Mm-hmm.
and you love blue widgets. You don't like red widgets so much. You really love blue widgets. So you make a lot of blue widgets, but all your customers are out there looking for red widgets. So by, putting yourself in that position of you are the master of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
you may create your own demise. So is being able to hear your customer, listening to your customers is vitally important. What do they want? What are you not providing? All those kind of things. So a lot of times I would sit down with the business and we'd have a brainstorming session that would say, what is the perfect um, taxi service look like? You know, and no, you don't limit yourself by whether it's makes sense or not. So if I had a perfect taxi service, I would always have taxis available for you, my customer, always. Well, we know that's impossible. But at the same time, we leave that as a goal to see how close we can get to what we know cannot be reality. It's a taxi service that's available 24/7. Well, that may not be possible. However, how close can we get to that? And then begin to set ourselves apart. I'll just share a real simple story of a company in Africa that was an airport shuttle business. And so we were doing that very brainstorming session. And I said, when I get off the plane flying to Africa from the United States, I said, I'm just as dry as a bone. I said, I don't care how many waters they've given me or how many orange juices or whatever. I am just parched dry.
Mm-hmm.
So what if, as a shuttle business, any of your customers, you keep a cooler on board and you stock that cooler with water?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, nobody does that. I said, exactly, exactly. But you provide it to your customers. It doesn't cost a lot. You don't charge them for it. It's just part of the service.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, then everybody's going to start doing it. I said, okay, then what we'll do is when a family gets on board or whatever to go to their resort,
Mm-hmm.
it may take 20, 30 minutes to get there. You give them a little card and they fill out information about themselves. What's your favorite drink? And somebody says, oh, well, it's Dr. Pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next time they fly with you, you've recorded that in your computer. And the next time they fly with you, you don't just have water, but you have a Dr. Pepper just for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're thinking to themselves, how in the heck did they know? Because
Mm-hmm.
they forget about the card they filled out because they're probably wiped out from
Because they're
travel.
tired. Mm-hmm.
And if it happens to change, you just have them fill out another card. So you're always updating information on your clientele that they may or may not remember, but you do. And it personalizes the service and it sets you apart from other of your competition.
Keith, I think to answer your question from my perspective in what those risks and challenges could look like for someone who doesn't have that that infrastructure or that team around them to bounce ideas off of, to make decisions. I think, and I can't remember who, but someone mentioned about the blind spots. Keith, I think that was you early on in the introduction. Many of us are familiar with the term, you don't know what you don't know. And it totally rings true here, because if you're making decisions by yourself, you're at the mercy of your memories. Have I ever been, you'll be like, have I ever been here before? And if I've been here before, what did I decide to do and what was the outcome? But if you haven't been somewhere before, then you don't know what to do, because this is the first time I've encountered this problem, or I'm up against this decision. I have to decide, do I grow or do I stay where I'm at? Do I hire an employee now or not? And I think obviously we live in the information age. A decade ago, we would say just Google it. Today, it's ask AI or go on Chat GPT or any of the AI engines and ask questions, which are all really good things. But I think first and foremost is just just to be able to recognize and see that I don't know everything, that I could have a blind spot here, even just that awareness of having that understanding. I'll share an example. For me, most of us drive vehicles. We drive cars, right? So we're aware that we have a rear view mirror. We have windows that we can look out of. They make vehicles specifically to help you eliminate blind spots. If we have a newer vehicle, it probably has a blind spot monitoring system that lets us know that there's another vehicle in the lane adjacent to us. And if we put on our turn signal, it might even chirp at us and let us know, hey, danger, danger. But I ride and have ridden motorcycles, and there is nothing like not having that secure vehicle of that metal cage around you and that metal armor around you. Keith, you were in the military, so you probably rode in some military vehicles that were armor. They weren't just metal or aluminum. They were designed to protect you. But when you don't have that, you're exposed. And so just I am so much a better driver now because I'm constantly aware, because of my experience being on a motorcycle, because I had to be aware of everyone around me. So I think having that awareness that you may not have the answer, even just having that thought can help drive you to ask questions, to find a potential mastermind group or find others who you trust as business people, even in this community that Keith has created and fostered is a community of people who have experience or might know what to do in a situation. But just more than anything, having the awareness is key, because then you can begin to not always second guess yourself, but at least think, I may not know exactly what to do here. So I need to do a little research before I make this decision.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. Both of you have mentioned the concept of a mastermind group. Um, you've talked about the need to have someone help you see what Dave, you used the example of a taxi service. You said, what does the perfect taxi service look like? So what does the perfect, whatever it is you're doing, look like? Taxi service being the example, but it's whatever the person is doing. That person or entity doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in your industry. In fact, there's a degree to which there's an advantage of someone who doesn't have jargon in internal knowledge to your industry, in that they can question your assumptions that are just inherent in the way your industry is organized. From the conceptual, theoretical to the practical, what is a system someone could put in place in the immediate term, like literally this week or this month, that would help them reduce the the burden of making the decisions, or give structure to the decisions that they're trying to make?
Good question. The practical is always difficult. That's why you see free seminars from the sales guy that made 3 million last year, and he's going to tell you how to do it. And most people go and they're all inspired and excited, and then they walk out the door and they never put it into practice. It's that application that is always the key issue. Um, I think you can build. It would be easy enough to build a series of questions that you ask yourself when you are in that place of decision making. Um, One, is this going to benefit my direction or not? So you begin to write down some things. This is a practical step. Write down some goals and things like that that you want to achieve, and then develop a measuring system by which you can tell when you get there, or steps along the way. And you reward yourself when you achieve different levels, whether it's a goal or it's a step towards a goal or whatever. But you're always mindful of what you're trying to develop, what you're trying to grow, what you're trying to maintain. And you use those questions and you put measurements in place to tell yourself how you're doing. Um, a lot of companies today use KPIs, but they don't always understand what they're doing with a KPI. It's a performance indicator. It's not an end result indicator. So if you have a sales force and a sales team that are out there, and you've determined that if they make 20 contacts with new people every week, that out of those 20 people, one person will has good potential to become a customer. And so having that indicator, that's what you can measure. You can't measure the response because that's not in their hands to control. But if making 20 contacts is a goal, or a key performance indicator, if they make those 20 connections, then they're going to begin to grow their business. So we measure whether they're actually doing what they're supposed to do, as opposed to what's the end result. And so that way we help. And as a solopreneur, it helps you um, keep moving forward, if you will, in that specific topic. And you start out being very real with yourself. Don't say, "Oh, I'm gonna make 50 phone calls this week," you know. And last week you made 3, so getting to 50 is not a real goal.
There's a
Maybe
huge gap there.
yeah, maybe a great wish, but it certainly is not an achievable goal. And so you build those kind of things into your work day, rather than it just being a haphazard. One business that I had early on fell apart because I didn't keep selling to keep the pipeline filled. So I would fill the pipeline and it would go dry, and then I go out and try and fill it again and it'd go dry, and I go out and fill it again. I wasn't I wasn't building
Mhm.
time into my week to keep that sales cycle
Yeah,
moving, because I was more worried about writing the programs.
yeah. They call it the
So
feast or famine stage.
yeah, yeah, totally. And so to begin to set some parameters like that in your solopreneur operation, it helps you to keep a constant flow instead of, like you said, feast or famine.
I think something that that folks can do, and I've actually in my small business now am starting to do so. I'm still learning this as well, but that's having a weekly CEO check-in. Since I am the CEO and the lead technician and the planner and I'm the sales guy, and I'm also the marketing person. I'm doing it all, but I rarely wear the CEO hat. It's just not something that normally comes natural to me. So something I'm beginning to do is do a weekly check-in, and I like to do mine at the end of the week because I've been asking myself a couple questions, and then I stop and I'm actually thinking about these things and beginning to write them down. And the first one is, what did I do this week? So what got done? So if I've got a couple clients right now and I'm about to onboard a third, um, I look back and I think about, I'll look at my calendar, the meetings I've had, the 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 progress that I've made in helping them. I've got one company that's a construction company, and they do like 8 different things. Their logo has an octopus on it, so that's just indicative of all the things that they do. It's a perfect logo for them. But I'm helping them and their management folks write SOPs across all the duties that they do. So that's a big task, and I'm having to break it down, but I'm looking at like weekly, how is this going? What got done? Where did I hit a stall? What created stress? And as I'm asking those questions, I can begin if it's not just this company, but it's other companies, and I begin to see patterns. I go, okay, well, it's creating more stress because I walked down this road with both of these folks and it created the same problem. So what if I do something different next time and think about a way to help get them to where they want to be without hitting that roadblock or that pitfall? The other thing that I really like to do is in not just what did I do, but what are 3 priorities for next week? Not 52 priorities. It's not 50 phone calls. It's what are 3 priority things I need to do next week? And they may not be customer related. They may be business related. It may be, hey, I need to do, it's tax season, or it's my quarterlies, or I need to find a new bookkeeper. And that's a priority, because if you don't make it a priority in those types of things and thinking about the business being worked on and not just working in the business, like Keith mentioned earlier, those things can come back and get you at a time that's not convenient. There's really never a convenient time, but it could be really, really bad. So identifying what those 3 priorities are for the next week. And there's a handful of other things, but it gives me an opportunity to just kind of take a step back from all the doing and really assess what got done, and what am I looking at? What are my priorities for next week? What are the 3 important things? Everything else, I'm finding that I can be very, very busy. Time can begin to manage me if I don't manage my time. So those 2 little things in that CEO weekly checklist, I think, can help, and they can take 10
Good.
or 15 minutes at the end of a week and begin to help you be intentional about moving your business forward.
Very good, David.
Awesome. I really only have one more question, and it ties to the CEO check-in that David just kind of so the working on your business instead of in your business. Obviously, when you're the solopreneur, you don't have an option but to work in your business. But what changes when you start allocating some of your time to working on the business and to thinking about how the work is structured and how you build systems for yourself to avoid analysis paralysis when it feels like you're boxing yourself into a corner if you make a decision and you feel like that decision is going to be something that's going to commit you to something long term. I kind of I think that's one question. I'm thinking about it in 2 different ways, but I think it's the same question.
I think one of the things is how you see yourself,
Mm.
your perspective of yourself. And
Mhm.
this is an area where you have to absolutely be honest. You can't kid yourself. You know, you can't say, well, I'm becoming this. Well, yeah, but you may not have the skills to become that. You may not have the mentality or the way of thinking to become that. Again, I'll go back to my story of many of the guys that I worked for. They were really good at what they could technically do, but they were not gifted in managing. And you have to see that from your own perspective and see where you fit in the business as you move forward, and be very, like I say, you can't be too honest with yourself. Um, I mean, I've had experience of working with companies where the guy was a phenomenal technician,
Mm-hmm.
but he was also the owner of the company, and he felt like he should be XYZ, but XYZ was not. I mean, you'd give him responsibilities as XYZ, and they were paying me to help them and all that kind of thing and get them started, but um he that did not fit who he was. And so one of the questions you can ask yourself as your company's developing and growing: would one of my competitors hire me in that position?
Mm.
So I'm supposed to be the owner of the company, which means whatever I think it means. Would someone hire you to be the owner of their company or to manage their company or whatever that might be? And so it's really coming to grips with your gifts, your talents, how you're wired. We're all wired different. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my son and I look quite a bit alike. Um, However, he's wired differently than me, even though we think about certain things in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's got gifts and talents that I don't have. And personally, I don't want. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we're all different. So it's really coming to grips with who you are and what does your future look like,
Mm-hmm.
and where do you fit in your company.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be the owner of the company without being the GM, or without, being the CEO or whatever it is. And you'll actually benefit the company more if you do what you're good at.
Awesome. David, do you want to jump in for just a couple minutes? I know you have a hard stop.
Yeah, and if I'm hoping I'm fielding this question properly. I understood it a little, but I want to correct me if I'm wrong. But um, I I think from something that you just said, Dad, was knowing who you are. And I think I alluded to it when I said the CEO weekly checklist. I'm not naturally a CEO. I'm not a visionary. So I know for my company as it grows, if I want it to grow, I will need people around me who are really good with vision, are
Mm-hmm.
really good with where are we going.
Mm-hmm.
And I can still be an owner, but I know that my strength is in operations. My strength is in how do we make that vision work? How do we get from A to B? I'm not a great salesperson either. So, but it's realizing who you are and what your giftings are and gathering those around you as a team grows um, to have those areas where you're not as strong, have them complemented so the team can be successful. Keith, I don't know if that helps at all,
Yeah.
but I mean, I want to be respectful of the time as well.
Yeah. Uh, I think that does address like the really key issue of the solopreneur who is a great technician and may not realize the business implications of not working on the business.
Mm,
Um, they're so busy doing the thing, and they don't. I think one of the issues. And now I'm just waxing poetic. Now I'm jumping on. Um, Dave, I know you have experience in Southern Africa. Um, I'm having conversations with people who are more Central Africa, and in the Philippines,
Hmm.
Indonesia, East Asia. Um, and I think there's a sense that in order to be a business, it has to have a building and they see the frame the framing is the business exists because it has an address on a street in a city. And somehow if your business is run, and I have my laptop is buried, so I'm not going to pull on my laptop. If your business is run off your laptop, I'm using an iPad as a simulation for laptop, that somehow that's not a business. And in this global economy that we're working in right now, that can't that business can literally exist inside the being of one human being. Um, but it creates this really huge challenge of none of us is good at everything. And so if the business is encapsulated in this one solopreneur, how do they outsource their liabilities, their weaknesses? Um, I think David, your point about knowing that you're not the vision person doesn't mean your business doesn't have a vision. It means you need to have somebody help you frame what that vision sounds like.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you both for your perspective, and your support in this project is greatly appreciated. I'm just going to transition into the conclusion. And so thank you both. Um, Over the past 45 minutes, because it's not been quite an hour that we've been actually talking because of my technical issues, we've talked about different businesses, different industries, and different environments. But Dave said very clearly there's these patterns underneath that are consistent, that flow through the the experience. And whether that's a larger organization, and Dave's run businesses that have 120 people in the team, or whether that's a solopreneur, and everything that happens depends on the one person. In each case, decision fatigue is a very real thing. Overwhelm comes when we have these decisions that have real outcomes, real weighty effects, and we don't have a system in place to make those decisions. The difference in both Dave and David mentioned how you can be the owner and not necessarily be the senior employee. Um, the difference between an employer and an employee is decision authority. The employee does things in the business. The owner is responsible for why the business. Um, what role the owner as an employee plays depends on the strengths and weaknesses of the individual. Um, and both Dave and David mentioned the cases where it makes sense for the owner to not be the senior manager, the chief executive officer, whatever that title that goes with that role is, um, because that's not what their skill sets are. But if they are the owner, they carry the ownership responsibility in addition to whatever tactical role they play inside the company. Employees execute within those boundaries. Owners are the ones that are defining the boundaries. When you have the power, the decision authority, the agency to to define the boundaries, that's a powerful level of authority. It's also a heavy burden to bear. So tying this back to the theme that I've been talking about for the last few months, when no one tells you what to prioritize, you have layer one authority applied to that business. When no one tells you what that business should pursue, you have authority over that business. When no one tells you what matters most in the prioritization for that business, you have responsibility for making that decision. Because you're not an employee, you're the owner. The owner would be, if you're only the employee, the owner is who's setting that boundary of what to pursue, what the boundaries of your authority are. And what David told us today is you don't have to decide alone. You don't have to be alone. But it does mean you have to decide. So having a team come alongside you to help you make the decision, to help you see your blind spots, so that you are not alone, even though you are the solopreneur in the business, but you can have a team help you see yourself and see your decisions. Build the systems that reduce repetition, that give you the reflection that reduces your need to react to situations as they occur. CEO check-ins help you reduce drift and say, am I still aligned? Are the things that happened this week aligned with what I intended to happen this week in accordance with my priorities that I set for the week? And are those priorities aligned with where I want the business to be a quarter, 6 months, 2 years from now? And both Dave and David talked about how you have documentation to reduce dependence on your own mental ability to make a decision in the moment. Having those KPIs that tell you the activities that you should be doing, prioritizing the activities that you should be doing, so that when you have a new opportunity presented to yourself, you don't have to make a decision in the moment. The tools don't replace your judgment. They exist to help you expose blind spots. They exist to help you ask, what assumptions am I making? What would make this situation fail? What trade-offs or opportunity costs am I ignoring? It's not to outsource your authority as the decision maker, as the business owner. It's to strengthen that authority. Because we live in an uncertain world, the goal is not certainty, because certainty doesn't exist. The goal is to give yourself a framework that governs your decisions so that you can move forward toward your goals. You don't need to eliminate complexity overnight. You don't need to hire someone tomorrow. You don't need to restructure your business. But do recognize, if you're the solo operator, you do have the decision authority. And authority, when it's structured, is healthy. Authority, when it's unstructured, leads to chaos. Next week, we're going to look at business models, not to label you, not to put you in a box, but to help you self-assess whether you're building the business that makes sense for you based on your strengths. Because when you know what you're building toward, the decision-making becomes lighter because you know what to ignore. We are also going to be seeing more of both Dave and David in the coming weeks. They've agreed to continue helping some of our private workshop members think through implementation of these ideas so that we can move from theoretical to the practical. For now, this is the takeaway from today. Where could you reduce decision fatigue this week? Not by adding something new, but by structuring something that is already there. because authority doesn't require perfection, it requires movement. Thank you for thinking with us today.